assessment. I know you might have done, the classic 2 essays and 1 exam at the end of the semester. I know you might be 100% committed to that. And to be honest, that's perfectly okay if you go through this process and you realize that, yes, we have actually fulfilled the requirement of a good assessment. However, as soon as we say, I've always done it this way, we're always at risk of providing assessments that don't fulfill the requirements of assessment, that they don't drive student engagement, that they don't assess the ILOs, and that they're not actually preparing students for the workplace, okay? So I want you to have a really good critical think. If you decide at the end of this that definitely you don't want to change your assessment, that's not a problem. I'm not forcing you to do it. It's just really important to think about your assessment and think about, okay, is this actually doing what we think it's doing? Because assessments are not just about ranking students. I know that might come as a shock, but they're not just about deciding that little Johnny is better than little Bob, So assessments have a bunch of purposes. So there are a whole bunch of resources below. We've got a whole bunch of, kind of online resources, so you can use those as well. This is really very much a start into looking at your assessment. So thinking about, okay, what are the key things? And then when you get together in your community of practice, you'll actually be talking through this and stealing ideas from one another and being critical of one another's thoughts, I guess, in a good way. So the first thing that we need to think about is, does this assessment actually assess the ILO? Now, this is a really common kind of problem because when we have a look at the ILOs and when we've constructed our ILOs, like you've discussed last time, that your ILOs will identify that, okay, we want students to know this and we want them to be able to do this. And then when you have a look at the assessment, which is, 50% exam and a couple of written pieces, that they're not actually doing that. So have a really good think about, so in this section, what you're going to do is kind of note down basically, really simply, what your assessments are, and then think about, okay, A, which of the assessments are they actually assessing? And B, be really critical. So if you're saying we want students to show critical thinking skills, and yet you're giving them a really kind of pre-formulated essay where you effectively tell them to, do another version of each sentence, well then maybe that's not actually assessing their critical thinking skills. Maybe it's assessing their ability to follow instructions, and sometimes that's necessary. But are they actually assessing that? Knowledge-based outcomes as well. If you're wanting to know whether students know things, well then you have to find out whether they know things. So your assessment should actually do that, okay? The second thing is it workplace relevant? And I know some disciplines are going to kind of, some academics, some disciplines, all of us are going to roll our eyes and go, oh my goodness, workplace. The reality is we're preparing these people to be valuable in the world. Now that's not always about making money, but whilst it might be well and good and important that they learn how to write for, scientific journals and things like that, think about how we can actually teach those skills in a way that have workplace relevance. So what is so really a student who does well at university should be a great person to employ because they have all of these other skills, okay? Now, if you're in a discipline that has a really clear relationship to the workplace, well then this can be easier. But thinking about when is a time that a student's using this skill or knowledge in the workplace, how can I replicate that within the assessment? And if you think from, kind of training literature, the closer the connection between those two, the better the transfer. So you'll transfer skills from an assessment to a workplace if that assessment looks very much like a workplace. But if there's a massive gap in between those two things, then it can be a problem. Sometimes this is a little more challenging. But think about, so if there's a big distance between what you're doing and where a person might use this in the workplace, well then think about how can we make it as workplace relevant as possible. It doesn't have to be one for one because not all disciplines are like that. But how can we make it as relevant as possible to the workplace? How can this skill be useful after they leave the uni? The third is, and this is a bit of a strange one and it reflects my own bias about the amount of time that academics that I work with work, is this assessment causing you administrative nightmares? Okay, we can all identify with this. We come up with this great assessment, we think fantastic, and then we end up spending 100 hours answering stupid questions because perhaps we didn't structure the assessment in a way that was clear. Or perhaps we thought, yep, let's give them feedback every single week on every single comment that they make, and then we, or, the lackey, ends up, spending hours and hours and hours on LMS answering questions. So it's all well and good creating administrative problems for yourself, but that time doesn't come from nowhere, and we all need sleep. So think about the assessment. Is this assessment problematic in terms of admin? Is there a way to keep the student outcomes really, really high without ruining your life? Okay, so have a think about, is this assessment structured administratively in a way that can that is simple to administer? And if not, talk to some other people about how to improve that, because there's all sorts of tools and creative ways to do it. So as you're working through, I want you to identify each of the activities that, each of the assessments that students are working through, and then think to yourself, does it assess the ILOs? Not just the content, but does it assess the, the skill that you're wanting to see them produce, or the knowledge, or whatever it might happen to be? Is it as workplace relevant as it can possibly be? And is it causing you administrative nightmares? Because if it is, fix it. You haven't got time to be spending hundreds of hours, working through poorly designed spreadsheets. Work out a way to solve it. So I hope that process is helpful. The other thing is, remember that you're going to be meeting with your community of practice group. If you come across things where you go, yes, it's causing administrative problems, but I wouldn't have a clue how to fix it, well then take that to the community of practice and say, you know what, I've identified a problem, wouldn't have a clue how to solve the problem, what do you think? And then someone else in your group, not necessarily the facilitator, will actually know of a way that you could improve it. So take advantage of the people around you. Stolen ideas are the best ideas. Nothing is ever new. Thanks. We'll see you next time.